The Martin Luther King Jr. federal holiday is a day on to educate, advocate, activate. The King Holiday extends beyond the one day and beyond the United States to encompass global, comprehensive, strategic work to eradicate the triple evils of poverty, extreme materialism, racism, and militarism to create the beloved community.
As recent events have shown us, we cannot wait. The most pressing issues of our time demand that humanity envision, strategize, and organize toward a more just, humane, equitable, and peaceful society with nonviolence as the pathway to that world.
We encourage people across the globe to use the MLK holiday and the days following as a way to engage in meaningful service, to advance the important work of groups, organizations, and entities that are engaged in initiatives to address systemic issues that have created disparity and perpetuated inequality.
What are we celebrating on MLK Day?
We are really remembering and reflecting upon a gentleman who gave us a means of coexisting together as a humanity. You know, how do we really get along and cooperate with all of these different beliefs and ideologies? That's really what we're commemorating.
President Reagan made Martin Luther King Day official at a Rose Garden ceremony today. Mr. Reagan had expressed early reservations about honoring the slain civil rights leader with a national holiday, but he signed the bill that had passed both the House and Senate by large margin.
In 1994, Congress passed the King Holiday and Service Act.
This celebration of Dr. King will now be a celebration of his vision of community, his vision of service, and his life proves that it will work for all Americans and for our country.
The bill was introduced by Congressman John Lewis and Senator Harris Warford, both of whom worked alongside Dr. King in civil rights activism. Participation in the MLK Day of Service has grown steadily over the past decade, with hundreds of thousands of Americans each year engaging in projects such as tutoring and mentoring children, painting schools and senior centers, delivering meals, building homes, and reflecting on Dr. King's life and teachings.
It's time to put ego and pride and fear and power aside and employ love and justice. My father reminds us that power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love.
Community engagement also includes initiatives in the form of peaceful protest, awareness and education projects, and philanthropy efforts to address critical health, education, human service, human rights, and environmental needs. We want this engagement to continue beyond the holiday and for volunteers to commit to having impact in their communities year-round.
So these young people are being prepared differently than I was because they live in a different time. But the most important thing they have to decide is not just to get an education and to be selfish about it, but that they must prepare themselves to give back and to make a difference in the world. We have to create what my husband called the beloved community. If we are to survive, we have to learn how to solve our problems and resolve our conflicts in a nonviolent manner. And so I think it's important for them to realize that they have a personal responsibility.
The MLK Day is a defining moment when many commit to service. We believe it will spark continual volunteerism that is strategic and impactful for the greater good, so we can build resilient, equitable, and sustainable communities worldwide.
Nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral questions of our time. The need for man to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to violence and oppression. Man must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. changed the world when he demonstrated what could be achieved through nonviolence. Now, you can learn how to live and practice this philosophy yourself through Nonviolence 365 Online, an innovative digital experience developed by the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change. Nonviolence 365 Online features extensive video interviews with real nonviolence practitioners, including the King Center CEO Dr. Bernice A. King, King Center certified instructors and trainers, and veterans of the civil rights movement. Explorations of the historic campaigns that helped Dr. King forge his philosophy. Immersive, annotated reading experiences that enhance Dr. King's most influential writings on nonviolence. Custom activities, including quizzes and interactive scenarios to help you practice along the way. Real-world exercises to help you start applying nonviolence in your daily life. Nonviolence 365 is a love-centered way of thinking, speaking, engaging, and acting that leads to personal, cultural, and societal transformation. It isn't just a concept for philosophers or political leaders. Nonviolence 365 is a powerful, practical approach to dealing with conflict and dismantling injustice. Whether it's in your personal life, in your school or workplace, your local community, or a national movement. Dr. King, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, and many others sought to create the beloved community, a society built on global cooperation and equity. This wasn't a lofty utopian dream. It's a realistic and achievable goal because each and every one of us has the power to make it happen by committing to nonviolence as a way of life. Take the first step today with Nonviolence 365 Online.
We join hands with people around the world who yearn for peace. We are tired of other people making decisions for us. We want to control what happens to us. We want to write our own history. We want to tell our own story because we feel that we know it better than anyone else.
The Martin Luther King Jr. federal holiday is a day on to educate, advocate, activate. The King Holiday extends beyond the one day and beyond the United States to encompass global, comprehensive, strategic work to eradicate the triple evils of poverty, extreme materialism, racism, and militarism to create the beloved community.
As recent events have shown us, we cannot wait. The most pressing issues of our time demand that humanity envision, strategize, and organize toward a more just, humane, equitable, and peaceful society with nonviolence as the pathway to that world.
We encourage people across the globe to use the MLK holiday and the days following as a way to engage in meaningful service, to advance the important work of groups, organizations, and entities that are engaged in initiatives to address systemic issues that have created disparity and perpetuated inequality.
What are we celebrating on MLK Day?
We are really remembering and reflecting upon a gentleman who gave us a means of coexisting together as a humanity. You know, how do we really get along and cooperate with all of these different beliefs and ideologies? That's really what we're commemorating.
President Reagan made Martin Luther King Day official at a Rose Garden ceremony today. Mr. Reagan had expressed early reservations about honoring the slain civil rights leader with a national holiday, but he signed the bill that had passed both the House and Senate by large margin.
In 1994, Congress passed the King Holiday Observance Act.
This celebration of Dr. King will now be a celebration of his vision of community, his vision of service, and his life proves that it will work for all Americans and for our country.
The bill was introduced by Congressman John Lewis and Senator Harris Warford, both of whom worked alongside Dr. King in civil rights activism. Participation in the MLK Day of Service has grown steadily over the past decade, with hundreds of thousands of Americans each year engaging in projects such as tutoring and mentoring children, painting schools and senior centers, delivering meals, building homes, and reflecting on Dr. King's life and teachings.
It's time to put ego and pride and fear and power aside and employ love and justice. My father reminds us that power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love.
Community engagement also includes initiatives in the form of peaceful protest, awareness and education projects, and philanthropy efforts to address critical health, education, human service, human rights, and environmental.
Is it Thursday? Thursday, the days are bleeding together with everything that's going on. Nevertheless, my name is Dr. Kalisha B. Graves. I serve as the Chief Research, Education, and Programs Officer at the King Center, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to 2026 King Holiday Observance and our beloved Community Global Summit. The theme for this year is Mission Possible 2, Building Community, Uniting a Nation the Nonviolent Way. And that is premised upon the idea that our goal is to not only inspire transformative conversations, but also to ask a central question: how do we set a framework for how people live better together? And so with that being said, we will move first to hear from our CEO, Dr. Bernice A. King, who will deliver our keynote. Now is the time.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm going to say it one more time. Good morning. Good morning. All right. It's a profound honor to stand before you at this sacred gathering, the 2026 Beloved Community Global Summit, on what would have been my father's 97th birthday. So happy heavenly birthday, Daddy. We gather under the banner in this summit of building a future together, in alignment with this year's King Holiday theme, which she already stated. And so this is not simply a gathering of leaders, thinkers, and innovators, but of people who still believe that humanity can choose a higher path. Do you believe that? We have to believe that. We come together not merely to speak a possibility, but to actually practice it. We gather in a moment charged with both peril and promise, a moment when the soul of our nation is crying out, not with a whisper, but with a groan of urgency, for healing, for direction, for a way forward that does not that does not deepen our wounds, but binds them. This is a moment when we must decide whether we will continue down the path of fragmentation or rise together into a new possibility. I stand here today with a conviction that is not merely intellectual, but deeply spiritual. A conviction that the way forward is not hidden, it's not mysterious, it is not unreachable. It has been handed to us by the prophets, by the peacemakers, by the truth tellers, by those who understood the moral architecture of the universe and dared to live by it. That way, for me, is the nonviolent way. the love-centered way of being, the Kingian way, the way that calls us to honor the dignity of every person, even our adversaries, to resist the forces that divide us through ideology and identity, rights and rhetoric, partisanship and propaganda. The nonviolent way that insists that we cannot build a future apart from one another and therefore must build a future rooted in justice and compassion. And yet, as we gather with hope and purpose, we must tell the truth about our world house. We are living in a time when the foundations of our shared world house feel unsteady. The social fabric is fraying. Across our nation and across the globe, instability is becoming a daily reality. Wars rage in distant lands and in our own streets. Civilians are being massacred. Children are being pulled from rubble in places like Gaza and Sudan and Congo and Ukraine and Haiti. Democracy is eroding in far too many places. Freedom is shrinking. Authoritarianism, imperialism, and extremism are rising. Economic inequality stretches wider by the day, some living in unimaginable abundance while others struggle to meet the basic needs of food, housing, and health care. Political division corrodes our democratic spirit. Climate disasters devastate homes and hearts alike. We're experiencing detrimental consequences of oligarchy masquerading as democracy, watching human rights norms be ignored or selectively applied, witnessing hatred intensifying, truth bending, and violence, dehumanization, and displacement becoming disturbingly routine. And beneath these visible crises runs a deeper affliction, a crisis of conscience and compassion. We scroll through suffering as if flipping through channels. We debate the humanity of our neighbors as if dignity were a commodity. Fear has become a currency of power. Anger is spoken more fluently than love, and hope is fading to a faint echo. People are losing faith in institutions, in one another, and sometimes even in themselves. We are divided not only by ideology, but imagination, unable to imagine a future together, yet we are here. We are here because we refuse to surrender our destiny to despair. My father, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., reminded us we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. What affects one directly affects all indirectly. Therefore, the way we respond to injustice, inhumanity, and inequity in our world determines the survivability of our humanity and the future our children inherit. The way is as important as the goal. The means are the blueprint to the end. That is why the nonviolent way is not simply a way, it is the way that heals, transforms, and builds the future together. The way that leads us toward the beloved community. At the King Center, we define nonviolence as a love-centered way of thinking, speaking, acting, and engaging that leads to personal, cultural, and societal transformation. Therefore, nonviolence is more than a tactic. It's more than a moment. It's more than a march. It is a courageous way of being, a disciplined way of life that transforms hearts and structures alike. It's a way of life that reshapes how we see one another. In the language of Nonviolence 365, it is a comprehensive framework for how to address injustice and inequity, how to manage difficult human interactions, how we lead institutions, how we raise families, how we govern communities. Nonviolence gives us the emotional intelligence and moral grounding to navigate conflict without dehumanization, to see disagreement not as destruction, but as a doorway to deeper understanding. Albert Einstein once said, "We cannot solve problems with the same level of thinking that we created them." The nonviolent way then invites us to think differently, to lift our moral and spiritual reasoning to a higher plane, where love guides logic and compassion directs courage. If there was a time we needed a higher level of thinking, I think you would say, now is definitely that time. A deeper level of loving, now is definitely that time. It's now because the problems we face are not today are not only political or economic, they are moral problems. They are spiritual problems. They are problems rooted in the erosion of good. And when a society loses its grip on good, when it grows suspicious of good, when it punishes good, that society is in danger. And I want you to hear me right now, because this is what was revealed to me by the Holy Spirit. We saw this danger, in the tragic killing of Renee Nicole Good. Her death was not only a physical tragedy, it was a moral indictment, a spiritual alarm, a prophetic sign that good, the very thing that we need most, is being crucified in our midst. What happened to Renee Nicole Good is happening all around us. Good is being killed, good deeds dismissed, good intentions mocked, good people targeted, good efforts sabotaged, good visions suffocated before they can breathe. And when good shows up in a space, in a place, in a conversation, in a community, too often it is met with hostility or suspicion. Her story forces us to confront a painful truth. We are living in a time when goodness in self is endangered. And that is why nonviolence is not optional. Nonviolence is the higher level of thinking Einstein spoke of. Nonviolence is the deeper level of loving our world desperately needs to embrace. Nonviolence is the disciplined way of life that protects good, restores good, and multiplies good. Nonviolence is how we guard the good. Nonviolence is how we grow the good. Nonviolence is how we refuse to let the world normalize the killing of good in our streets, in our suites, in our systems, in our speech, and in our spirit. So if we are to protect good, if we are to multiply good, we must confront the myths that keep us from embracing nonviolence fully. Myth number one is often people think nonviolence is only for activists, for organizers, those marching to protest injustice. But nonviolence is not an event, it's a lifestyle. It belongs not just to movements, but to parents raising a child in a world of chaos. Children and youth navigating bullying and violence. Neighbors choosing between suspicion and solidarity. Law enforcement and ICE agent encounters. Co-workers dealing with workplace tension. Corporations and corporate and faith leaders making decisions that affect hundreds or thousands. Technocrats developing AI platforms. Athletes managing aggression and modeling behavior, entertainments creating and dispensing content, educators handling conflict in a classroom, media commentators opining on social and political affairs, elected officials thinking through social and economic policy together, candidates conducting political campaigns. It belongs to all of us. Nonviolence not only gives us discipline and strategy to resist injustice and evil, it should shape how we resolve conflict in marriages, how we treat colleagues who disagree with us, how we handle differences in faith, politics, and identity. It must influence how we post and comment on social media, how we speak to each other in everyday encounters and interactions. As my mother, Coretta Scott King, so wisely said, the greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. Nonviolence is a compassion in action. It calls us not to be silent in the face of wrong, but to respond with the fierce love that seeks justice without hatred. Myth number 2 says that nonviolence is weak, that it accepts abuse without resistance. But my father taught us that nonviolence is a powerful and just weapon which cuts without wounding and ennobles the man who wields us. It's not passive, it's not weakness. Weakness is reacting without thinking. I want to say that again. Weakness is reacting without thinking. Weakness is letting anger drive the car. Nonviolence is moral power under discipline. It is strategic resistance grounded in the strength of spirit. Strength guided by love, the kind of love that protects good even when good is under attack. And then myth number 3 is that nonviolence lets people get away with injustice. Nothing could be further from the truth. That it fails to hold wrongdoers accountable. But nothing could be further from the truth, as I said. It confronts. It demands, it disrupts, it holds accountable without destroying the soul of the one who must be corrected. When people ask, but how do we hold people accountable? I respond that nonviolence holds us all accountable to the truth, to justice, to the transformation of systems that oppress and seeds of harm that live within each one of us. It does not cancel people, it calls them in and calls them up. It demands apology and restoration, not humiliation and eraser. It does not excuse, it exposes so that the redemption can take place. That is the harder work, but it is the work that builds the future. The easy thing is to destroy. The sacred thing is to restore. If we're serious about protecting good, if we're serious about multiplying good, then we must speak then directly to the places where our culture is shaped. So I want to go a little deeper, where the narratives are exercised. Nonviolence is not only necessary then in our homes and our neighborhoods, it's necessary in our headlines, in our storylines, in our boardrooms, and in our policy rooms. So just a moment, I want to talk about how nonviolence is needed in the media and entertainment world, because we don't talk about that enough. We watch, what we hear, and what we consume shapes what we believe is possible. When media normalizes cruelty, goodness is weakened. When entertainment glorifies humiliation, good is distorted. When platforms reward outrage over understanding, good is drowned out by noise. But when storytellers choose dignity, when journalists choose truth without venom, when creators choose narratives that humanize rather than dehumanize, they become architects of good. The stories we tell either protect good or poison it. And nonviolence gives us the discipline to tell stories that heal, stories that elevate, stories that remind us of our shared humanity. But I'm not going to stop there, because we need it in government and policy, in the halls of government, because policy is power, and power must be guided by love-centered principles. If it's to produce good, when elected officials weaponize fear, good is endangered. When leaders choose partisanship, there you go, Bernice, partisanship over people, good is compromised. When policy is shaped by anger instead of empathy, good is pushed to the margins. But when leaders choose nonviolence as a governing ethic, when they listen deeply, legislate justly, and lead with moral courage, they create policies that protect good, expand good, and institutionalize good. Nonviolence is not soft governance. It is wise governance. It is just governance. It is the kind of governance that builds a future where good can flourish. And then we need it in the corporate and business world, because workplaces shape the daily lives of millions. When companies prioritize profit over people, good is diminished. When leaders tolerate toxic cultures, good is suffocated. When decisions are made without considering their human impact, Good is sacrifice on the altar of efficiency. But when business leaders embrace nonviolence, when they cultivate cultures of respect, when they treat employees with dignity, when they use their influence to uplift communities, they become stewards of good. Nonviolence in business means leading with integrity, operating with transparency, and making decisions that honor the humanity of every single stakeholder. It means recognizing that the bottom line is not the only line, that the measure of success is not just profit, but the presence of good. Kingian nonviolence, the heart of the King Center's work, begins within. Its 6 principles and 6 steps guide us to transform both individuals and society. It teaches us that nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people, that it seeks to win friendship and understanding, that it attacks forces of evil, not persons doing the evil, that accepts suffering without retaliation for the greater good, that it avoids internal violence of the spirit, and that it believes that the universe and God himself is on the side of justice. Nonviolence 365 is the modern expression of these teachings, calling us to live these principles 365 days a year, not just in moments of protest or commemoration. It calls us to be consistent witnesses to love in our homes, workplaces, and governance. And what is all of this for? It's for the beloved community. A global society where justice prevails and love governs. My father said the end of nonviolence is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. The beloved community is not a utopia beyond reach. It is a daily commitment. It is a space where differences are embraced, where reconciliation is structured, where peace is the presence of justice. My mom reminded us that the beloved community is not arbitrary or fanciful. It is achievable through courageous actions and the will to love. Nonviolence gives us the tools then to navigate conflict without destroying relationships, to disagree without dishonoring, to convict without crushing, to advocate without annihilating. It transforms tensions into growth and every moment into an opportunity to create good. Good in our systems, good in our relationships, good in our shared humanity. If we're to build a future together, we must refuse to dehumanize. You cannot build a future with people you refuse to see, hear, or honor. We cannot build a future together with clenched fists and hardened hearts. We build that future when we choose the nonviolent way daily, intentionally, courageously. It is the path of the tenacious, the visionary, those who believe humanity can rise higher than its history and create good where good has been harmed. I see a future where good rises, where it's honored, protected, and routine. A future where love is louder than hatred, where justice flows, where communities thrive, where the beloved community becomes a structure, a habit, and a destiny. And I believe with every fiber of my being that this future is possible. Mission possible because nonviolence gives us the power to protect the good, restore the good, and advance the good. So let us rise as protectors of good. Let us build as practitioners of good. Let us lead as ambassadors of good. Let us live as creators of good. Because when we choose the nonviolent way, we build a future together where good will have the final word. Thank you.
I'm sure you all will agree with me in the fact that Dr. Bernice A. King is one of the most profound speakers on the planet. The same witness, the same profound witness that resided in her father and her mother resides most profoundly in her. So thank you so much, Dr. King, for that call to action. At this time, we will have the King Center's 2025 year in review or year in impact, and then we will welcome our first panel.
In a world shaken by conflict, where violence rises and communities struggle to hold on to hope, there is a place still teaching us another way. For 57 years, the King Center has carried forward a legacy, not as history, but as a blueprint for the future.
Students with King builds on that foundation. In 2025, young minds across the globe gathered for the Students with King Reading Corner, engaging more than 1,000 schools, inspiring a generation to read, reflect, and rise. The King Center also served as a virtual classroom featuring teach-in resources, a spotlight series, and civil rights talks that reached educators and youth in the United States and abroad. Through the Beloved Community Leadership Academy, leaders learned the 6 principles and 6 steps of nonviolence, not as theory, but as a daily practice, a discipline, a way of life.
The information that I am learning in this program, I take back to my home school, and I try to educate my own friends so we can all build a beloved community and live in the World House peacefully.
In a time when faith communities are too often divided, the Better Together Initiative united global participants, Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Seekers, standing shoulder to shoulder for the beloved community. And in the corporate world, the Atlanta Dream stepped forward, embedding nonviolence into their culture, their leadership, and their commitment to inclusion.
There's answers in that curriculum. It's how you apply it that matters.
When I moved to the US, I struggled with low self-esteem and that. The whole training has given me a safe space. It's like a therapy for me.
When wildfires devastated communities in California, the King Center partnered with the Atlanta Dream in restoring one's hope of Atlanta, packing care packages and sending hope across the country.
The King Center, in partnership with the King's Table and New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, brought food, dignity, and hope to Atlanta families.
We want the world to know today that although the shutdown is over, we have not shut down our compassion.
From Atlanta to Montgomery, the King Center's fellows, interns, scholars, and Beloved Community Leadership Academy students walk the path of history, encountering the past, learning its lessons, and carrying its courage into the present.
In a world growing more violent, the King Center is growing something stronger. This is the work. This is the moment. And together, we build the beloved community.
Okay. All righty. We're doing some exceptional work at the King Center. I often say the work we do yields immeasurable dividends in the lives of the people that we touch. And so now it is time to get into our first conversation, Mission Possible 2, A Future We Build. And so I'd like to call to the stage the moderator, Dr. Rashad Ritchie, as well as our panelists, Dr. Bernice A. King, CEO of the King Center, Paige Alexander, CEO of the Carter Center, Jill Savitt, CEO of this great edifice, the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. And I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Okay. So the moderator will be Reverend Natasha Reed Rice. No? Okay, the moderator will be Dr. Rashad Ritchie, and our panelists will be Reverend Natasha Reed Rice, Habitat for Humanity International. Yes.
How's everybody doing? So they're getting the cards, so just give us 60 seconds. How's the panel?
We're good.
We're good. Okay. I'm waiting on my notes so I can make sure we go around, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with giving everybody in here a round of applause for giving a damn. Can we do that? Is that all right? Okay. All right.
Rashad, can I just say one thing?
Yes.
Real quick? The lights that are shining on us are extremely bright. It makes it almost blinding. So I don't know if we can, is there a way to balance the house lights with those lights, Jill? Yeah. Because those are like.
And it's coming in
once you
both
look at 'em,
directions.
you just, yeah.
I'll wait for the lights to adjust slightly. Okay, all right, much better. We can actually see people. Okay, here's what we want to do. We want to have a conversation today about grounding our advocacy in morality. And there has to be a moral grounding if we're going to make it sustainable. I remember it was said that you can create change through violence, but it's not sustainable because it's not grounded in morality. So we're going to start with the purpose of this conversation is to create a practical foundation for the entire summit. The goal is not to offer parallel perspectives, but to build what's called a shared narrative. A shared narrative that shows how the future is built together across values, trust, lived experience. Each panelist carries a distinct part of that story. The conversation moves intentionally from why the future matters to what threatens that future, what holds that future together, to what makes participation possible, and finally, how leaders should act together. Moral grounding. Why a shared future begins with a shared humanity. Dr. King, I'm going to start with you. How does a shared future, this shared vision, how does this connect to the greater goal of having, as we would say, a beloved community?
Well, I'm going to start with the obvious first. Without it, we'll have a disastrous community. One of the most profound things that any of us can do is to recognize that I am because of you, and you are because of me. Mm-hmm. That we are actually interrelated, interconnected, and interdependent. That was a fundamental belief and understanding of my father. It's something that regardless of who you are, what your belief system is, what your ideology is a reality. It's like gravity. You know, you can go jump off a building that's however high up if you want and believe that you can survive it. And when I say survive it, maybe you might survive, but you'll be damaged pretty good because gravity is a reality. Our interdependence, interconnectedness, and our interrelatedness, especially today because of science and technology, is a reality. And so in order for us to create a shared humanity, we have to understand that. And then we have to understand our inherent dignity and worth, that every human being, as I said earlier, has that inherent dignity, even those that you oppose, even those that oppose you, the adversary, the ones that we believe are the most evil people in the universe. Those individuals still have inherent dignity, worth, and value, and that's one of the hardest things for any of us to see and believe. But when we have that kind of foundation, It gives us the practical tools to think through a different lens, to act, a different way, and to put together decisions and create policies that are helpful, not harmful, that uplift and not destroy.
Well said. I'm going to just go down the line on this. My next question is about the who belongs. There's this thing that has happened in our politics of now, and it has really always kind of festered. Who belongs in humanity, right? Who among us is good enough for us to say, well, they deserve to be, and then we create this othering by creating this category to almost make that person non-human, because then it can justify the adverse actions of policy, the adverse actions of violence, the adverse actions of neglect. And so my question is, when societies begin to question who belongs in that society, whose humanity matters, what is at stake, not only morally, but socially and also economically for the future?
We have a gallery upstairs about human rights. And so the answer to the question is the name of that gallery, which is Everyone, Everywhere. Human rights are the outline. There's a Universal Declaration of Human Rights that in 30 articles outlines the minimum that everybody, because they are human, is guaranteed to have what you need just to have a life of dignity. It's got 30 articles, and they're all upstairs. They're on a wall. You can look at each of them, and they outline the floor. Of course, you could have more, but you need a minimum. And so human rights, every country of the world has signed on to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it's enforced by treaties. And it outlines what it means to have a standard of dignity, and it applies to everyone because they are human. So no one is exempt from it. The problem is, how do we enforce it? And how do we make sure that it's not manipulated? Because where we are right now is that there is an effort to divide us based on these individual traits that people have, their background, who they love, where they come from, what they believe. And the beloved community is this idea to resist that I will succeed because of you, and you will succeed because of me, that we're in it together. And so I think if we keep this idea of everyone, everywhere in our minds, we'll remember who belongs. It's all of us. But we can only get there if we unite together and resist the temptation to be self-interested. We've lost this idea of what it means to have a common humanity, that we all rise when we all rise, that everybody is in this together, and there is an attempt to say, no, you get yours, pull up the ladder behind you. And that has taken hold in our country, and I think one of the things about the beloved community is that we have to resist that. That is what nonviolence is resisting the temptation to be manipulated out of fear, that if you get something, it's taken away from me.
You said something powerful, to resist temptation to be self-interested. Wow. Paige, I'm going to go to you for this next one, because I'm privileged to do the work of the Democracy Resilience Network at the Carter Center, where we look at being disinterested and being self-interested all the time, where we intentionally try to look toward cooperation rather than self. And in a society that tells us some lies, the first lie is it's not enough for everybody. That's the first lie. People tend to look self rather than outward. What is the condition, or what are the conditions, in your opinion, that must be present for societies to move from this instinctive mode of survival to a mode of shared cooperation?
It's, thanks, Rashad. It is the uncertainty that sits on all of us right now, and that lack of understanding of access to information, of looking through the lens of, the reason their old adage is, you see what you want to see. We've all seen the videos in the last week, and I will tell you from the people that Rashad works with on the left and the right, we see totally different things. And so part of this is the grounding that's necessary in the certainty of the dignity of the human rights, that everyone matters and every life matters, and we're missing that right now. And so I think what we need is the basic access to information. We need the certainty. We need to stop othering each other. And we need to find a space where in a beloved community, we can all come together. Dr. King was talking about the fact that violence, that nonviolence resistance, sometimes it looks different. It might seem that we are retreating into ourselves, but we lost Claudette Colvin this week. She was a 15-year-old girl who sat on a bus and was the blueprint for the bus boycott. She was 15. That was a nonviolent resistant act that she took that didn't require going out into the street with a sign. It was just, she felt that she had people like Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth on her lap saying, don't get up. This is your right. We all deserve this. And so when you find those nonviolent resistant acts, it gives us agency. It allows us individually to find community and to rise up and rise above what's happening right now. And I think that's one of the things that actually can empower us, is if we can find that community that we can do that in.
Well said. I want to talk about storytelling for a moment, because storytelling is, in my humble opinion, the great space of imagination. And the great space of imagination is where creation happens. If I can't see it, I can't achieve it anyway. I have to be able to envision it somehow. So when we come together to create opportunity, movement, momentum, trust is not always there. Right. Willingness is, but trust isn't. So I'm going to ask you, dear sister, how can we utilize the great art of our collective imagination to build trust when will does exist?
You asking me?
I'm asking you.
Well, I want to kind of combine
Absolutely.
some of what you've talked about in terms of the humanity piece. I was, a few years back, honored to be in the room with President Carter at the Carter Center. And he asked the room, what year did women get the right to vote? I'm asking you all. 1965. Yeah. Because
which women?
Right. That's the question, right?
Which women?
Because in 1920, white women got the right to vote. Ida B. Wells did her best to intervene in that process, right? Other black women-oriented groups did their best to intervene in that process, but black women did not have the right to vote. And he asked that question in conversation about humanity. Because what happens oftentimes, and this is, I'm gonna get to the collective storytelling, is we decide who's human, we've talked about that already, oftentimes based upon imprints and stories. So I'm also a pastor, and the conversation and concept of beloved community includes the concept of agape, which has a theological basis. And even those who don't call themselves faithful, right, are influenced by a theological imprint that decided who was human and who wasn't. And that's how we divided up the continent of Africa. We decided who was human and who wasn't. That's how we enslaved people who looked different than us, because we decided they were less human. That's how we got to the 3/5 compromise. That's how we got to all of these things that determined who was human and who was not. The concept of beloved community expands the notion of who is human. The conversation in question of President Carter really pushes us into a place of curiosity. And storytelling ignites curiosity, about one another, which ignites imagination. Why haven't we been able to begin to see others as human? We don't have unintentional run-ins with them at the library or the PTA meetings or the grocery store, because we live in a country that made the decision several decades ago to segregate our living patterns. And that systemic reality has kept us from realizing when someone who doesn't look like us did something wrong, we don't say that's Mary's boy. We've othered them into thinking they're on the criminal side versus the family and community side. So there's a lot in that conversation about storytelling that I love, because it is in that place, right, that we begin to have the prophetic imagination that imagines a world that can be community. So one thing I'll just, if you do indulge me for 1 second, because I had to pull this up, since I'm here to talk about housing in certain points. I love this quote of your father's, Dr. King, where he says, we've inherited a large house, and this is the world house concept. That's the last chapter of his finally published book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. He says, we've inherited a large house, a great world house in which we have to live together. Black and white, Easterner and Westerner, Gentile and Jew, Catholic, Protestant, Muslim and Hindu, who, because we can never again live apart, must learn somehow to live with each other in peace. And so coming out of the holiday season, where we had to sit across the table from people within our own families that we may or may not agree with, we had to figure out who's gonna get the leg and who's gonna get the wing. Who gets the breast? Right. Who deserves the breast, right? And so in those conversations, in this conversation, in beloved community, if we enter them with curiosity, we can actually begin to figure out how we craft a story of shared humanity. And as we're breaking bread together, we begin to build trust.
I got to follow, well said. I got to follow up because we want to make it practical and a shared experience. So here's the shared experience. How does something as practical as housing instability shape the collective narrative and self-belief about a society?
So it's often hard, that's where curiosity has to enter. It's often hard for people who have housing stability to imagine how hard life is when you don't have housing stability. Right? When you're trying to figure out, we would say, how to rob Peter to pay Paul. When you inherited equity, perhaps, that has then been taken away from you because of eminent domain. When in Atlanta, we have the conversations around economic mobility, around income gap conversations. We have conversations in the housing space upon workforce housing. Let me get into that conversation on humanity. In my opinion, oftentimes workforce housing is worthforce housing. Who's worthy of housing options? And if we begin to break down who's worthy and who is not, and embrace the notion that we are interrelated, and if we don't deal with the instability of housing, which in that instability, you have health outcomes that go down, you have educational attainment that goes down. When you look at that juxtaposed against what housing stability provides for someone, peace of mind is immeasurable. The ability to have peace of mind and housing stability allows you to enter into spaces nonviolently. It's very difficult to think of nonviolence when everything around you is unstable. And so how do we begin to give people some sense and semblance of stability? Matthew Desmond wrote the Pulitzer Prize winning book, Evicted. And in it, he has a really powerful quote that compares the criminal justice system and housing. And he tracks in Milwaukee the eviction patterns that impact communities. And in that demographic, those most impacted are African-American women. And when you begin to develop an eviction record because of housing instability, you have even a harder chance of renting again. So a single mother, 2 children, gets evicted for whatever whimsy of the landlord, can't get into a space where she can keep her children safe, where they can study, do their homework at night, where they can have solid meals and all of that, that then lead themselves to a stable environment. And he says, Black women are locked out with these eviction records, and Black men are locked up. So that instability in community and in family then makes it almost feel impossible to develop stability, health outcomes that allow you to thrive, educational opportunities, right? So all of those pieces are interrelated. which leads us into a conversation of a need for having beloved community.
That's right. Well said. I want to talk about, absolutely. I want to talk about the cause and effect. Every effect has a cause, every cause has an effect. Dr. King, your father talked about the fierce urgency of now. The fierce urgency of now. Back during his era, there were good folk who said, wait. Today, we still have good folk, or what we will call allies, who will say, wait. Here's what waiting has got us. We have adverse policies. We have extremists in our expression of government. Well, what can we say to the fierce urgency of now? Because I think everyone sees the reason why there needs to always be a fierce urgency of now. How would you articulate that message in 2026?
Well, for me right now, I think there's a knowledge of the fierce urgency of now, but I think we lack I don't know if it's called the skills to understand how to manifest that. Because we've grown up in a society that has pushed a lot of individualism. You know, we teach our kids about, you know, some people going for the bag, some people get your education, do this, do that. We don't raise people with the mindset of understanding our collective humanity as we're growing up. We don't think about career paths that even as we get into our careers, there's still a humanity that we are amongst. And so in order to address the fierce urgency of now, we have to have the ability to understand that although we have individual pursuits, individual callings, we have a collective responsibility. And in that collective responsibility, we've got to figure out how do we bring together all of our different strengths into a collective to impact whatever we're talking about, whether we're talking about the housing issue, or whether we're talking about what's happening in criminal justice or in the environment, whatever. People are working on things fiercely, but they are lacking strategy. They're lacking effective organizational skills. And there's something that I have tried to get people to look at in Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos of Community, the book that was published before my father was assassinated, because a lot of people say his last book, but there was one that was published afterwards. And he talked about the nettlesome task is to discover how to organize our strengths into compelling power so that the government cannot elude our demands. I say, so the power structures today cannot elude our demands. Why is that important? Because there's a fierce urgency. We got this going on. We got to do this. Everybody just, you know, in their individualistic way, because we tell everybody, make your voice be heard, but we never talk about how do we collectively in a coordinated, cohesive fashion work together to impact whatever it is we're talking about. So that organizing of strengths is important, because we get together and we organize around passion. And there's nothing, passion is good, but it doesn't give us the strategy, the mindset, the know-how to tackle what we are faced with. And so for me, that's how it has to show up. So I suggest you really meditate on what he was saying when he said, it's nettlesome, you know, because most of us, we want things quick, fast, in a hurry. So the fierce urgency also means for many people, now. If it doesn't happen now, you know, they don't understand that when Daddy talked about we can't wait, he was not saying that in engaging the process, you still don't have to have patience with humanity in their hearts catching up. But we have to do the necessary work and put things in place that protect us from certain harms while people catch up in their hearts.
That's right. That's right. This is a round robin question. Yeah, let's give it a round of applause. Beautiful answer. And so I'm going to have this for everybody. I've been told I got about 5 minutes left. But I'm going to start with you, Dr. King. I'm going to start with you. Nonviolence is often misunderstood as passive. It's misunderstood as passive. How does nonviolence function as an active strategy for keeping people in relationship with one another rather than retreating into fear or hostility?
Well, I think something she just said about curiosity is so important. Remaining curious is an important ingredient, you know, because it keeps you open. It keeps you asking the fundamental important questions. It checks your hostility. You know, it causes you to say, wait a minute, there's something behind this, there's something else. And so I feel like we have to cultivate curiosity in order to do that.
Well said.
Yeah, I think in your interactions, a nonviolent approach is to say, am I trying to make a point or am I trying to make a difference? Because you behave differently. If you're just trying to get something across and be heard and make your point, you might not succeed in the end, because part of what the beloved community was based on and nonviolence is based on is you have to imagine that we're going to be together after the disagreement. So how are we going to be together after if you humiliate someone or degrade them? You're not able to have an after. And so you have to think, am I just talking to talk and hear myself and punch you and feel better about it? Or am I trying to actually change something, which means my orientation toward you, who I disagree with, who I even maybe don't like, I have to live with you after. So what can we do to be together in the after? And how do I behave right now, knowing that that's the goal?
Well said. Well said. Paige?
Yeah, I think, it is so easy, absolutely. It is so easy to retreat into ourselves and to not listen. And so for me, to Jill's point about are you trying to make a point, we all have to listen. We have to open that aperture, and it's not easy. If you're watching CNN or MSNBC, you're not going to turn on Fox. Like, you don't really want to, but sometimes you really have to hear what is being said. And that's part of bridging these divides, because there is commonality. We can find common ground. We've seen this movie all over the world. We have seen authoritarianism take place. We have seen vulnerable groups be put down. We have seen women not allowed to vote. We have seen all of that. And when you bring it home, it's like at the Thanksgiving table, who's getting the leg and who's getting the breast. Those are conversations and those are discussions that you've got to listen to each other, and you have to give, you have to compromise. President Carter used to say, peace is not the absence of conflict. It's about trust and it's about conversation. And that's where we have to get to, because there is common ground to be found. And that's part of the nonviolent way of finding that common ground and then building from that.
And I think I have to say, the other day, Dr. Bernice, you said that community is the moral imperative today. And as I think about even what you both have said just now, if you go alone, you go fast, but if you go together, you go far. And we have far to go. And so figuring out how we can do more together, win together, make greater impact together is essential to us seeing our way out of what feels like a very fearful, violent moment, because we're better than this.
That's right. Very well said. Very well said. To the panel, I want to give them a roaring round of applause. give you a roaring round of applause. Thank you all so much. We'll be around for questions. Thank you.
Great. So we are going to move into our break. I want to say very quickly, there's a scripture in a book that I like to read, and it says, "We're compassed about by so great a cloud of witnesses." And it was so great to hear these return here by 10:59 so we can get started right at 11. Thank you.
At the Beloved Community Leadership Academy, we are preparing you to be change agents. Say, I'm a change agent for the good. You, the students of the BCLA, are part of a new generation of leaders who will not only reshape the world, but will protect and uplift humanity. You are the pioneers of a new world.
I was in your seats not too long ago. I was surrounded by people who understood how to go into a situation with the mindset of love instead of hate.
So everybody say this after me, say, come and go. Awesome, that's the first type of conflict, all right? Now let's go to the second type of conflict. Everybody say opposite go.
Y'all repeat differing values. Right, and limited resources. Those are two of the other common types of conflicts that everybody deals with.
If you can see to your right and to your left, there are sticky posters on the walls that already have a type of conflict. And your responsibility, as Celeste and I yell out these different scenarios, is to go stick a sticky note on the conflict you think we're describing.
Two classmates clashed over their beliefs during a debate on school dress code.
Which one did y'all choose? Different values. Are they right, CD?
They're right. We're going to go on a scavenger hunt, and the scavenger hunt will explain what is on the grounds here.
We invited this amazing panel to come and talk to us a little bit about direct action, as well as the Beloved community and where you guys fit into all of this.
And one of the things that's so unique about Dr. King is that he was able to share truths about people without dehumanizing them.
The goal in a nonviolence campaign is to defeat the injustice, not the people.
How do you prevent retaliating if somebody isn't willing to hear you out or anything? How do you prevent retaliating or coming back?
Retaliation has no place in nonviolence campaigns. Daddy respected people's right to self-defense. He chose a different route in his self-defense, but he respected people having an individual right to self-defense. Self-defense doesn't come into the equation when you're in a nonviolent campaign movement and you're dealing with protest and demonstration.
People always ask me what was Dr. King against, and I'm like, wow, that's a struggle for me because he's a long list of things he may have been against, but what I really know him for is what he was for. You want to be known for, as young people, even when you get older, what you're for, not for what you're against.
We are the Beloved community.
Birmingham was a place where they put the movement into song. There were some of the best voices. And I mean, everybody loved to sing. Every mass meeting, the first half hour was nothing but singing freedom songs. And that would not only get you emotionally worked up to overcome your fears, but it would get you inspired and courageous to make you want to do something about your fears and not give in to them.
My expectations for today are to have a lot of fun and to learn a lot.
I'm really excited to just learn a lot of history and make connections today.
My expectations for today are really just to be able to know about the history and honor the lives and legacy of the great leaders that have come before us.
I want you to just prepare your minds and prepare your hearts, because you're going to the cradle of the civil rights movement where it all began.
We are in the great state, Alabama, and we are about to get started.
I've seen the videos of the history, but to actually be in person, to see these historical sites and to read and witness the figures, the historical figures that were part of this movement, that were part of us, of our freedom. That is inspiring, and I can't wait to see it.
What I'm looking forward to this trip, like Sandra said, looking at these historical figures, but also just being able to be in person and learn new things that maybe the history books didn't talk about.
This experience to both of these museums it had me speechless. Of course, we've all learned this in AP History or AP African Studies, but just coming to these museums in general, it really had me in tears.
Like, what really got me was when we were walking through and we saw the statues of the people in the sand. That's what really made me tear up first, because knowing that we had to be in those tight ships when we were dying from disease and famine and the brutal causes, and it was justified because they thought of us as we were inferior.
While at the memorial, I decided to count all of the stones that were from Georgia specifically. I had counted around 247 stones itself. Around average, each stone had about maybe 5 people least, 20 people most. Timing 20 with 247, that will be around 4,920 names.
This is what needs to be seen, because then as we reflect, as we go forth with this in our heart, we can then change that narrative and make sure to personify these people who lost their lives while they were enslaved, as well as ourselves.
This is not Black history, this is American history, the United States of America history. And you've got to tell this to your family, your friends. You've got to educate this oral education like we did in Africa when we were young. It has to be there because our system is trying to wipe this out.
We already did a reflection at lunch on the first half, and so now we're going to talk about your experience at Dexter, what you learned.
From slavery, from segregation to police brutality, we still got a lot to develop and learn about not only our history, but learn about how we came and how we come together.
Yes, we can implement our ideas and we can talk about them and want to do it, but it's one thing to actually do it, and seeing that our leaders did that and that we can do that and we're the next generation, that at this point, I don't want to sit down and not do nothing.
Right. 2 different women, powerful women in their own right, who were part of what we call, when we do our education and training, 2 different campaigns of the movement, born through 2 separate generations, but were young people like you, younger than most of you in this room.
It was when I was 8 years old, growing up in the Selma civil rights movement, when my life was changing without me really even knowing it. Growing up in the midst of experiencing racial discrimination, violence, tears, But we heard those conversations. We heard about what was going on, and we wanted to be a part of something that led toward what we used to call the freedom of our people. That was Mrs. Parks' message. And so at 11 and 12 years old, I was knocking on doors, asking people to go down and register to vote. You're not too young to join in the fight in the right way with the proper training. The strategies were used back in the 60s. The Ministry of Nonviolence made a significant difference in terms of the results that happened in the movement. What I'm telling you is that I had a made-up mind, like you. He had a made, but we're gonna be in this thing called freedom. Get involved, connect with people, and have people connect with you.
Carter Center. And it is also my honor to introduce this distinguished panel. I will give you a brief a bio of who they are, but there's a deeper read in your materials, which is worth taking a look at. So first we have Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins. Bonnie Jenkins is most recently served as U.S. Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security, becoming the first Black person to hold any undersecretary role in U.S. Department of State. She is the founder and executive director of Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security, WCAPS. And she holds distinguished appointments at George Washington University, the University of Virginia, and the University of Dayton. Welcome, Bonnie. We also have Salah Gass, for whom a consistent through line of her career has been a focus on development and growth strategies that foster long-term stability and peace. Her career spans from global leadership roles at MasterCard and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She has pioneered digital solutions that empower underserved communities and advance economic opportunity worldwide. This has included supporting conditions for lasting peace in fragile and transitioning contexts, including on the continent of Africa, where she's lived for many years. Welcome, Salah. Ambassador Bisa Williams is a career diplomat and peace-building expert with decades of experience advancing democracy, conflict resolution, and human rights. She currently teaches at Yale's Jackson School of Global Affairs. And from 2018 to 2023, Ambassador Williams led the Carter Center's work as independent observer of the implementation of the peace agreement in Mali. Ambassador Williams has served across the globe in Africa, Central America, Europe, the United States, and in senior roles at the U.S. Mission to the United Nations and the National Security Council at the White House. Welcome, Ambassador Bisa. And we have my colleague at the Carter Center, Dr. Jenny Lincoln. She has served as the Carter Center's principal advisor for Latin America and the Caribbean since 2015, guiding the center's work on democracy, peace building, and human rights throughout the region. She teaches at Latin American Politics and U.S. Foreign Policy toward Latin America at the Sam Nunn School of International Affairs at Georgia Tech. And one fun fact about Dr. Lincoln is that she has been a credentialed international observer in 23 elections across Latin America. Welcome to you all. So as we start with some questions, I think we'll do questions for about 40 minutes or so and then turn over to the audience for maybe about 15 minutes of questions as well. All right. So I want to frame this in the format of Dr. King's positive peace. When we look at peace building in practice, peace building in action, that is the reason that you're all here and have hopefully wonderful experience that you will share with us. One of the things about nonviolence is what Dr. King refers to as this creative tension, right? That nonviolence is not actually a passive, but actually, in order for it to be in action, we work through this creative tension. So with that, I would like to turn it over to you for our first question, which is, what does sustainable peace look like in today's world? How do we measure success beyond the absence of conflict? Would you like to begin, Bisa?
Sure, thank you. I really think, particularly based on, first of all, let me thank you for including me in this panel, and it's really an honor to be here. But if we bear in mind what we heard from the last panel and think about what's happening globally, as a former diplomat, I'm retired now, I've come to realize that there are really two kinds of ways of looking at peace when we're trying to be practitioners. There's what governments try to do. We look at sustainable peace as having elections, making sure the judicial system is up and running. Maybe you want to look at all the cabinet officers were looking at big structures, and we talk leadership to leadership, we talk militaries to militaries, and we have an idea of how to reset stages. But I was recently, when I was involved with the Carter Center, and we were actually trying to observe how they were going to implement something that the warring parties had agreed to, the peace accord in Mali, and subsequently I was involved in some research in Mauritania. What you find is the people who are the communities that are affected by conflict, the peace that they're looking for doesn't necessarily, the first thing on their mind is not elections. The first thing on their mind is not the larger structure. It's like, how am I going to make sure my family is safe in my community, is respected in my community? How am I going to be able to practice the lifestyle that I have? Am I a fisherman? Am I a farmer? Am I nomadic? How can I ensure that who I am and what I need to make sure that first my family, then my community, then my community's relationship with the community next to me are all at ease. And I have found that kind of sustainable peace relies on, yes, communication. First of all, there has to be a willingness and a respect for the mutual humanity of everyone that we were talking about before. But this idea that the communication cannot just be with this notion of the educated leaders or the elected leaders. It's got to be a two-way, a multi-way communication that respects the priorities of the people that you want affected by this peace. So that's one of the things I would say. And the collaboration that we talk about has to be an ongoing collaboration of respect for who are the leaders that your local community respond to. We have not, in traditional diplomatic practice, made a consistent effort, let's say, of going to religious leaders, of going to non-formally educated leadership, and going to women, going to youth. But you'll find that I have worked a lot in Africa, so I'm basing this on my experience, particularly in West Africa, in Mali, in Niger, in Guinea. The first protectors of stability and confidence in a community are exactly the women, the youth, the village residents. And I think part of the formula for an enduring peace has got to involve respecting them, understanding what they're looking for, and making them part of the decision-making process.
Can I add to that? Part of another factor is, and this is my lens, which is going to be economic growth and technology, but I think we have to start thinking about economic stability as human dignity. Because what you're talking about is the ability to express yourself as who you are. Part of that is knowing where your next meal is going to come from, that you can pay your rent, that you can provide for your family, whether macro, where there's jobs and the economy is supporting graduates coming out, or micro, as I said, you're sitting around your table and you don't know where your next job is coming from. That is a way to breed instability. And this is not an indictment on vulnerable populations. They're not to be blamed, but they are susceptible if you have that vulnerability. I think, and you guys are the expert, most conflicts are not solely based on ideology. They're born and sustained in poverty, exclusion, hunger, and desperation. Legitimate grievances. So I think paying attention to the economic opportunity and the agency as humanity has to be part of peace building. And just quickly, I would say in that, what I'm worried about particularly is young people. Because we have global unemployment, youth unemployment is 13%. That means there's 65 million young people who are disconnected, are looking for what to do with their lives. Even in the US, where unemployment is about 4%, among young people it's 10.8, so 11, almost triple. So what are we gonna do with young people, I think is a question. And the last thing I'll say is kind of the counter to that is I think economic opportunity gives peace credibility. Because if you think about what does peace mean for me, like you said, it's not the high treaties and just based on people who are kind of elite and educated, it's did my life get better? Do I have a job? Can I feed my family? And I think that's the real evidence. And I just saw Styx walk in. And you guys will see an amazing movie, I think tonight or tomorrow night, about nonviolence. It's kind of the thing we're talking about in Watts. And he said something very wise last night. He said, we stop the nonviolence, but we'll see if it works and it's going to be sustained if we can give people economic opportunity. So I just want to add that as a factor when we think about what peace means.
Thank you. Let me throw another question into the mix, but please feel free to continue to comment also on the first one. So how can peace-building efforts remain resilient in the face of political instability and economic shocks? And so far, our two respondents have started to highlight this area that I'd like us to consider as well, which are marginalized stakeholders. How can our peace-building efforts sustain political instability and economic shocks, particularly as it comes to marginalized stakeholders?
I guess I'll start with that one. One of the things that is very important is that we have an inclusive process when it comes to peace building, when it comes to maintaining peace. One of the, as many of you probably know, there's been studies done, for example, for women, and ensuring that when after a conflict, when you're trying to bring people around the table to discuss next steps and what's going to happen to resolve conflicts, and you bring around the table all of the groups that were part of a conflict, it's very important that women are part of that role, because the studies have shown that when women are part of these peacemaking processes, that peace lasts longer. And I think what that shows is that you have to have the different perspectives, and the people who are affected are at the table. Because another factor, the people most impacted by the lack of peace and the lack of security are women and girls, and particularly women and girls of color. And unfortunately, a lot of times, they're not at these tables. So we have to maintain and ensure that these different marginalized communities around the world are involved, and it also help to ensure that peace does maintain, because if it does reflect the viewpoints and the concerns of different parties, you get buy-in, you get people who want to help maintain it because they had a voice. But you also make sure that the issues are tested. And if you have, even if you want peace, if you have peacemakers who don't understand the different perspectives, it won't be the best decisions that are made. So we have to find ways to do that. It's a challenge in many societies, even our own, to make sure that these voices are included, to make sure that things are successful in the end.
Thank you. Jenny, would you care to comment?
Well, as I listen to everyone speaking on this, I'm thinking about the case. I came here prepared to speak on the case of Colombia. And one of the things that happened in the Colombia Civil War, a 52-year, that's multi-generational civil war, was how to get to a peace accord that they signed in 2016. And so I was thinking about how you get to peace and how you sustain peace, and that what the threads that are coming out here brought an anecdote to mind. And that was the voices of the voices to influence getting to the peace and implementing the peace. And one voice comes to mind, a woman named Esther Ruiz with UNICEF, who is in Colombia, trying to help the parties come together with a resolution and implementation plans. This was a civil war between a guerrilla group and the government. Peace accords signed, and when they were preparing for the implementation, that meant that people who had been in the mountains fighting for decades were going to come back into society to settle. And Esther said to the government people, there are going to be babies. For 48 of those years, the FARC had successfully mandated there be no babies. There were women fighters. There were women fighters there were women in all the generations of the FARC guerrilla that fought the government, and there were parejas, there were couples, but there were no babies. FARC took care of that. But when the peace accord was coming forth, they relaxed that mandate, and there were pregnancies and babies. The government didn't listen. And when 7,000 soldiers began to demobilize and came in the pangas, in the rivers, in the boats, there were panzas, pregnant women, and babies. And the government wasn't prepared. So they hadn't listened to the voices. They hadn't listened to the women's voices. They hadn't listened to a technical UN authoritative voice. And so what just brings to mind is at every level, in every society, in every culture, there's a fundamental principle of inclusion that's a requirement. We're talking about women. You can say the same thing for the youth, and I'm sure people have cases on that too.
Thank you. Lisa, did you want to contribute?
I'd like to sort of link the comments that have been made by both Bonnie and by Jenny, in that in my experience in Mali, again, we had a peace accord that was signed the very same year, 2016. We were with the former warriors and the Malian military, as well as the Malian executive government, the government, at the table. Very, very hard for them to say, okay, we signed this agreement, now what's our first step? A lot of arguments. When we did bring in women, first of all, there was resistance to the women. One of the outside parties, another government that was supposed to be a friend of Mali, said, we don't want educated women in here because the people in the north where they had the rebellion, they're not educated and they're not the same. So we don't want to mix them up. We don't want those northerners to get ideas from the southerners. That's the first thing. We overcame that barrier and brought the women in. The women from the south, from the west, from the north, all had the same idea. We want the schools back open. We want our girls to be safe on the street. And we want health services back. And they were all able to say, that should be the priority here. Where the men, the warriors, the government, were stuck on anything to stop implementation. So I learned as an ex-diplomat, but a wonderful representative of Carter Center, that you've got to make sure that there's a distinction or that there's an amplification of voices and participation. Once you get that peace agreement, of course, the warriors have to be in the room. You've got to tell those soldiers, those thousands of soldiers that are in the hinterland and everything, there's going to be a way for you to come back. There will be a future for you. But part of that future has to be the communities. And who are those communities? They are our families, they are religious leaders, there are other community leaders. And formal processes have not engaged them. So I think that's one of the things that's important.
And can I just say that you don't include communities as like a nice to have or a handout. There is power in proximity, right? I think proximity is a PhD. And if the solutions don't include people who are proximate, they're incomplete and you're empowering. So one of the roles that I had at a previous company was running one of our technology labs in Nairobi. So we were responsible for all the digital solutions for financial inclusion across West Africa and across Africa and Southeast Asia. And one of the principles we used was human-centered design. And that's just a very fancy way of asking people what they want. People know what they want, they have the solution. I think it's about unlocking it. If you don't have it at the table, you're missing something. I will never forget, there's this company, we didn't partner support it in Somalia. It's a microfinance institution called KIMS, K-I-M-S. They figured out how to fund loans sustainably and commercially for off-grid solar in Somalia. Think about that. There's very little electricity in Somalia. People can't charge their phones. They don't have lights to do homework. They can't walk around safely. They figured out, even the people that they lent to were pastoral, so they moved around with their cattle. There is seasonal income, all sorts of things that a bank would say, we can't touch that. They figured out how to do it. So not only is that community now less vulnerable, it's a viable business, and there's more businesses in the community, and that came from listening to people. So I just wanted to put a finer point on what everyone was saying. If we don't, I think we're lost if we don't.
Thank you. Wonderful. All right, we will take a moment now to look at the Hyatt treaties. I think it's important for us to consider where all the sort of building blocks kind of fall into place. So my next question is, how do you balance sovereignty with international engagement when designing and implementing peace agreements?
I guess I'll say a few words. So I've done a lot of work on treaties. Most of them arms control treaties, which deal with weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, nuclear weapons issues. But it's the same. There's the same concept in terms of understanding sovereignty, in terms of how you deal with these things. I think we're seeing now in the world today, as we're seeing in the news, clashes of sovereignty and clashes of international relations and international law, for example. And when you're trying to promote peacekeeping, when you're trying to say we're going to get to a table, we're going to try to negotiate, we're going to try to put together a treaty that's going to regulate something or prevent something or stop something, there has to be a recognition that all states are in control of their own territory, that there should be a respect. These things are mentioned in the UN Charter. There's respect for sovereignty of all countries. This should not be interference unless there was a very huge case of some very strong international violation. And so that should be ruling everything. And then when you sit down and you have these negotiations with other countries, that's the basic foundation, is that every country is in charge of its own territory, but we find that there are some issues in the international sphere that we need to try to work together and try to be on the same level playing field. We're going to try to have some kind of international regulation or international understanding of how we're supposed to behave. And that's based on our understanding. It doesn't have to be a legally binding document that you have, as long as there's a respect for each other's territory and respect for the rule of law, in this case, whether it's international law or whatever, that we're all going to abide by. And when you don't have that is when you start having the problems, when sovereignty is not respected and legal rules are not respected, because there is no international policeman. There's no one that's going to tell states you have to do this. States have to regulate themselves based on agreements that they make amongst each other. And it's a lot of the same kind of concepts are domestic. It's the same respect for individuals or countries, respect for rule of law at the state level, country level, international level. You have to have these basic concepts in order to make it all work together.
I think that's a really pertinent question now. We're all in the U.S. looking at what is the United States really doing in Venezuela. I'll let you handle that. What is the United States doing, maybe going to do in Iran? But early in my career, I was a young diplomat in Panama. And people have made a lot of parallels between Venezuela and Panama, and I'm going to try to say that they're not quite exact for this reason. This morning, the very moving panel that we heard this morning talked a lot about recognition of our common humanity. So yes, there are such things, the Western world, Westphalian concept of the nation, of the state. There are borders, most of which were imposed by just somebody's grand design, just lines on the sand, literally. However, recognize as states. What is our responsibility when you have a population that's being oppressed? Maybe not by its elected government, maybe by the only armed force in the country, which is the military, which decides that it wants to take over the government. So in 1987, I teach now, and most of my students weren't even born in 1987. It's very funny to me. But anyway, I was alive and well, and in Panama. But at any rate, in the 80s, the United States, which had been very close to a corrupt government and very close to the Panama's military, changed its mind. The head, Noriega, was very blatant in his drug smuggling and one of his soldiers killed an American soldier, and we used that as the straw that broke the camel's back. So that's part of the U.S. story for intervention. But for years, the Panamanian people had been protesting against that oppression. So at what point do you say, I see this boot on your neck, but you're in another country, you're just gonna have to figure out how to get it off your neck? Or am I my brother's keeper? Can I invade and help you? Can I come and help you? So as it turns out, Panama had had its elections. Noriega said, no, we're not gonna, there was a blood-splattered picture on Time magazine, all that stuff. We're not gonna acknowledge these, and we're fully officially taking over. The US came in and put an end to that. But the Panamanian people came out into the streets to say, thank God, thank you. We didn't have the wherewithal to go against this. Now, what has happened since? You know, the country has evolved, corruption has not been eliminated, the military was changed into more like a National Guard kind of a thing. But I do think that's a question. I think it's a legitimate question to ask. At what point? It's wonderful if people are strong enough to say, a government is strong enough to say, yes, I'm now requesting that the UN come in and help me against this force. Well, what if they can't? I don't have the exact answer for that, but I do think, it's worth serious reflection. Because if we just decide to say, one small anecdote, and then I will stop. So Noriega was blocked into the Vatican's embassy, and the US military was waiting for him to relinquish himself. But meanwhile, Latin American presidents were calling Endara, the elected Panamanian president, saying, don't let the Americans have him. Don't let the Americans have him. You can't do that. You'll lose face. It's terrible. You can't turn over, even if he's a terrible man. He had beheaded people. He'd done terrible things that everybody knew about. Don't do it. Don't do it. So Endara, whom I knew well, said, Bisa, they keep telling me that I want to keep Noriega. I don't want to keep Noriega. You know, as far as I'm concerned, you all can have him. But I said, I understand the issue. He's a national. Of course you want to keep him. What you need to do is say, gringos, you can have him, but we want him back. I got to get my country together first, which was true. Panama City was burning. There was no jail to keep him. So that worked from a human rights point of view. He said, I have been supporting human rights my entire profession. That's why I've been in jail. That's why I've been doing. I'm not going to let the first human rights case against Panama be because I let the people kill Noriega on the street, because if I try to keep him, that's what's going to happen to him. So I tell that story because I do think that there's a role for helping an oppressed people. I think we have to be careful about deciding it, but I think we need to ask that. And maybe the UN, maybe the current structures that we have don't address that well enough. So,
Jenny.
Oh, Lisa, I went a different way in my brain when she mentioned this, but I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Because I was thinking about there are clashes at every level, in the sovereignty level, but then there are clashes with conflicts inside the governments too. And keep in mind that all negotiations are political, and they have to have an element of legal basis. But so many times, the negotiators agree on something that does not have legal base. And I'll give you an example. One example is in the Colombia Peace Accord. They said, okay, everybody's got to participate. Everybody's going to participate. But the FARC was an illegal organization. And so they had to then go to the Congress and pass a law to allow the FARC to be a political party. So there are different levels of clashes, and you have to understand where the law is, whether it's international law, national law, or one of the best conflict resolution examples I saw during this time. Part of the peace accord was a special transitional justice. Transitional justice is just that, special justice. It's not the current law, it's a completely different law framework that basically is based on pardon. It's based on pardon. If these people who have committed horrible atrocities go before the court of special justice and say, gee, I'm really sorry about that, then they may get a whole lot less sentence. And this is part of transitional justice. Well, the entity that was set up in Colombia, the court, I accompanied the head judge and the Attorney General of Colombia, who's responsible for formal law, went to the communities. They went to the indigenous communities to ask community leaders, because communities had laws, and leaders who executed decisions. So they went to say, all right, your sanctions, when someone commits a crime in your community, how do you handle it? And what are your punishments? And that's when I saw that in this conflict resolution, in this implementation of a peace accord, there were 3 jurisdictions and 3 types of justice that were then they implemented together. And so that's way under the sovereignty level, but that's what came to my mind.
Thank you. Let me put in another question. I have 2 more questions before we turn to audience questions. So pivoting a little bit, looking at sort of future-proofing for peace, I think our tools and what we have available to us is actually ever expanding. So my question is, how can technology be leveraged to strengthen peace building? And how can digital tools improve transparency and trust in fragile states without deepening divides, if that's possible?
I think that's probably to me.
Yes, please.
It's interesting to think about. I think first, kudos to the Carter Center, the King Center, for thinking so broadly about peace. And I often don't hear peace and technology, economic stability all in the same conversation, but I think it's necessary. I think what I'll say quickly about technology, I think there's a couple call-outs, but then I think there's some optimism. I can't think about peace and stability and peace building without thinking about like how technology can divide us and the, what do we call it, fake news. I was reading something that said in 5 years, 90% of what's on the internet will be AI generated. And so how do you even think about what to believe? So whether it's information you can't trust or lack of information, we see protests around the world where countries cut off the internet. And so you're siloed and you're not getting information. So that worries me a little bit. The other thing is, of course, with AI, you can't be on a panel without saying AI. The lack of jobs or the kind of changing of the job curve, if you will, for AI, if we are not careful, will hit lower income and lower wage workers and not the jobs that are a little more protected. And what that'll do, I think, is create a lot of inequality. And if we think the digital divide was bad, what AI can do with this, with the rapidity, the rapidness of innovation will dwarf any digital divide we've ever seen. So those are the things I would kind of watch out for. I think the optimism is if we can get ahead of it, if we can use it, like the panel said earlier, for peace of mind and for dignity, there's a lot of opportunity. So I just came from Ghana where I was doing some work in AI, and there the government has a national strategy on AI. And they are, some of the numbers they were looking at is if they can get AI in agriculture just to have smallholder farmers produce more crops, $300 million US can be added to the smallholder farmer community annually. Over 1 million jobs can be created, remote jobs from youth when they have a very high youth unemployment. And across Africa, $2.9 trillion can be added to the economy from AI. So there's some pros and there's some cons. But I think if we're going to use technology as a tool for transparency, we have to watch out for inequality, and it has to be applied evenly, or else it's just going to make the divide between haves and have-nots, I think, worse, which is detrimental for stability.
Thank you. May I have a time check? I walked up here without. Thank you. Okay. Okay, wonderful. We're going until 12 or? Okay, great. Oh, 45. Okay, great. So let me pause at this moment and turn it over to the audience. Maybe I can collect 3 or 4 questions, and then we can channel those to our panelists. Oh, yes, please.
All right, so my question for the panelists, I taught a policy and law course, and Doc, you mentioned about these multiple notions of justice. And so I'm curious, how do you actually do the work of peace building in a community if people have different notions of what justice is and what it looks like?
Can I start on that one? Oh,
Let me see if I collect a few more questions. Any other questions in the audience at the moment? Yes, please.
Professor Smith here, retired Emory University. In early 2000s, we had Bishop Tutu in Atlanta, and some of us tried to incorporate some of his teachings about pursuing TRCs, transitional justice programming here in the United States around our local issues. So the question would be whether your foci on global peace building that might include transitional justice could apply. Here in the States, Bishop Tutu was always clear that because we are a more developed democracy does not mean that we do not need transitional justice as desperately as some of the still struggling democracies do. What kind of role could there be for transitional justice, pardons, amnesty, forgiveness, as the price for implementing justice, moving forward on justice domestically here in the United States? Can we be learning from your global processes for what we need to be doing here in the States?
A very valid question. One more? We'll take both. Go ahead.
Regarding how can transitional justice be seen as justice when it's based on pardons and the pardon system is corrupted?
Thank you. Last one.
Hi, I'm Katrina from Atlanta International School, and I've been very privileged to have lived in several countries. And so my question is really around building that international mindedness. How are we, because we're having this conversation, but I do understand that this conversation for some of our community members it's distanced, if you will. And so how do we build global understanding so we can have these collaborative international relationships, like Desmond Tutu coming here, like an understanding of paralleling Mandela's practices and Dr. Martin Luther King's practices? How are we building that efficacy or that understanding in our local communities?
Thank you. Okay, so panelists, I would love you to use those questions as food for thought to also include your concluding comments.
Okay, I'll start. And I'll try to answer as much as I can. The idea of different notions of justice is very important. Again, with our example in Mali, in implementation of that peace accord, there was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That was a Malian commission. And they took over 10,000 testimonies from all different parts of the country. So these were the villagers from the north who had been part of the rebel groups, as well as city dwellers in Bamako, all over the country. What they found, however, and I think that's something that sometimes can be harder, for example, for the Western diplomat, or if you come in with your traditional tool chest to accept, we think, and if you look at the Nuremberg trial, we think of justice, we want a punishment for the victim, for the aggressor, and we want, sometimes there are reparations, but basically we want to condemn and punish. That may not be the cultural mindset of the country that has suffered the crime. And in Mali in particular, what we heard, what was really sought was a recognition of the violations, and sometimes financial restitution, sometimes it was, we don't need for this other family to be deprived of the main person that is their livelihood, that the man of the family, because he killed our father, because that's just gonna make two poor families without a livelihood in this community. We want some kind of financial restitution, and we want our two families to forgive each other. So, but that kind of compassion and humanity, that recognition is not always something that the international community that brings its apparatus to the fore can always accept. But I will say, Rwanda was a case where they had the Gacaca courts. They applied justice in their community way that made sense for them. Same thing with Mozambique. They had a special cleansing ceremony for the child soldiers. Sierra Leone did the same thing. So I really think there has to be a respect for the differences that you're going to find in the country of conflict or countries of conflict. So that was one thing. The role of amnesty and forgiveness in the U.S., it's interesting because we do have a pardon system that works for friends of the pardoner, let's say. But there have been other instances in our court system unequally applied. So maybe somebody else. I don't think that the idea of amnesties or pardons is something. It's an alien idea in U.S. practice. It's just selectively practiced. It's selectively practiced. So that has to do with the voting booth. Pardons are corrupt. Yes, they are.
Ambassador, maybe we can pass the mic. We probably just have a few moments left. Jenny, did you want to take?
I want to answer, but very quickly, I'd like to share with this audience. I didn't know I was going to say this when I came here, but I realized that in 1967, Martin Luther King spoke in Marietta, Ohio, population 17,000 people, at a very small college, Marietta College. I was a senior in high school, and I got to see him there. And I think that marked my life because I was interested in cultures, I was interested in peace, but when he spoke so eloquently that day and charged this young group of college kids and a senior in high school to go forth and do good, it was very, very, very significant. The professor who asked about the United States, also, this strikes me. Because I'm thinking, why don't we have transitional justice? Or what kind of transitional justice do we have in the communities? And actually, I think we do have a little bit, but it's not equally applied. But for example, the difference between punishment and forgiveness, there's a continuum there, and there's an educational factor. There is can someone be course corrected with some kind of forgiveness? There are judges, there are a few, who actually try with the road toward rehabilitation rather than punishment. What is scary right now is that we're turning to such harsh culture of punishment. How do we stop the wheel and roll it back to get some compassion, understanding, forgiveness in our society? And that's where I think we are today.
Yes, thank you so much. Salah.
I was just going to address the last question quickly, that it seems this conversation seems distant. There was a Nobel Peace Prize speech in 2002, actually, that Jimmy Carter gave. And in it, he said, the root of conflict is poverty, inequality, and injustice. And that is something, unfortunately, that's universal. And especially when I think about what's going on in the US now, what I turn on my TV and see, having lived and worked around the world, we're starting to look more and more the same in our lack of a functioning justice system and what is being accepted as acceptable these days. And so even if you look at economic factors, GDP, how things are going, I think we're more and more similar. And I think maybe starting from that point of the similarities, it brings it a bit home, because I do think that poverty and inequality is kind of the root of what's happening now.
What I was saying was, if you could expand on this, is how do we educate our community in understanding that global lens, we're all the same, and we're all going through the same thing, so that we can connect on the global lens. What's happening in Mali is happening in the inner cities of Detroit in similar ways. So how do we get the inner city? I'm from Detroit, that's why I said that.
I'm from Chicago.
That's it. So I want to kick that question over to our Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security founder.
First of all, I have a lot of thoughts on these things. So I got so many thoughts about accountability and pardons, and there's just a lot. On this issue, it's hard, I tell you, because for what I do in my organization is I try to help make that connection between the international and the domestic, and to help people understand that what we're seeing here is not separate from what's happening overseas. It's challenging because a lot of people, understandably, don't want to focus on the international because there's things going on at home, especially now. Especially with the lack of health, with the insurance and things like that. Things are happening that's impacting people directly with their kids. Can I afford the food at the grocery store? These are real issues. Taking away civil rights. It's all over the place. See what ICE is doing. So it's very understandable. On the other hand, we lose a lot by not understanding this. And one of the things I was talking to Alana about, and I want to highlight, is this is a perfect time to show the connections, because we can see exactly what we're doing here is what we're doing overseas. And we have ICE here doing what they're doing. We're not respecting rule of law here. We're ignoring things that the courts are telling us. And what we also see is international law doesn't matter. And we're going to do things that are going against the laws of war and against the UN Charter. And we're going into other countries and kidnapping people. Strong connection. And so I think now is a good time to help people understand that there is a connection and there is a consequence in not understanding that. And understanding that there are things that we are definitely doing exactly the same things, being just as bullheaded overseas as we are being here. So, but it's a challenge, I tell you. It is, because some people are like, I don't want to deal with that, and I understand it, but it's just right. This is a perfect time.
We may have to let that be the last word, and to me, that's a call to action. I want to say thank you for your powerful insights, and thank you all for engaging so thoughtfully. My call for us to action is that we leave here, we carry forward the challenge to seek accurate, diverse information, ask questions, and practice everyday peace in spaces where we have influence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you again to our panel. I want to say this was a remarkable panel, and together you all represent a great ecosystem of not only experience but knowledge. So thank you for sharing that with us today. It is now time for our lunch break, and so we'll break for lunch now. If you all can return no later than 12:29, because we'll be getting started at 12:30 for our midday masterclass. Thank you.